The tools for achieving your wellness goals are right outside your door. You just have to know where to look, and I'm here to help. I'm Missy, an East Texas Christian herbalist, here to share conversations about local plants, where to find them and what to do with them, local vendors, the area's top sources for natural health products, and local practitioners, the professionals you can trust to get to the root of whatever you face. Whether you're here to learn, connect, or live more in step with the land, you're in the right place. Welcome. Imagine this. Go with me on a little mental field trip. After this crazy winter freeze passes, you bundle up, you throw your shovel over your shoulder and head out into field and forest. Picture how the woods feel stripped back, silent. The trees are bare, the air's damp and cold, and everything that lives has hidden away in the frozen ground or tucked itself into bark and berry. Under the dry crunch of leaves, the ground is hard, but there are still treasures to be unearthed, and you're here for it. You dig into the cold earth for roots rich with medicinal promise and prune bare branches from winter trees, and then you take it all home and you sit by the fire where you spend dark winter evenings, turning it into herbal support for the year ahead. If that sounds like something you want to do, keep listening. On today's podcast, we'll talk about 5 plants traditionally used as medicine you can harvest right now, along with what herbalists say about them and how to process them. It may look like everything's dead and dormant out, but winter is actually when I gather some of my most important herbal allies. So how do you know which part of the plant to harvest? Well, it's the part that's currently the most active. That's where the plant is putting its energy. One thing I learned that helped me know when to harvest what is to think of where the plant's keeping its energy as the season progresses. So if you picture the plant coming up out of the ground in spring, its tender shoots come up and the energy goes into new growth and new leaves. And that's what you harvest in spring if that plant part is used. And then you move into flower and fruit, the plant reproduction part of the cycle. And the plant's putting all of its energy into those parts. With most medicinal herbs that are harvested in summer, you're gathering all aerial parts, everything above ground. And then in fall, if you can picture a plant in your mind, it's dying back and going dormant. It literally, like the life moves back down the stalk or the trunk of the tree, so the energy returns to the root where it's preserved through fall and winter. With trees, the leaves drop and the branches and the trunk are what remains. When the sap slows and the plants pull inward, their energy concentrates. So winter is root season, it's bark season, and if you know where to look, winter offers some of the most powerful medicines of the year because they're super concentrated in those parts. Today, I want to walk you through 5 plants you can forage in East Texas during winter. They're old allies, deep medicine, grounding, steady, and especially supportive during the colder, heavier winter months. Let's start with the tree. The first herbal medicine you can forage right now, this is January 2026, is mimosa bark. Mimosa, the tree, not the drink, is also called Albizia julibrizin. It's known in traditional Chinese medicine as the tree of happiness. In summer, it's covered in soft pink blossoms, and they're fluffy and festive, and they smell just amazing, and the insects are buzzing around, and they just sound happy. The flowers have a use of their own, and we're going to talk about that in April or May when it's actually time to harvest them. But in winter, its medicine lives in the bark. Mimosa bark is deeply nervine. Traditionally, it's used for grief, heartbreak, depression, emotional stagnation, the kind of sadness that settles into the chest, into the trunk, and refuses to move. This is for when you've been holding it together for too long. Mimosa has anti-inflammatory actions, and in traditional Chinese medicine has traditionally been used for the physical heart to support the cardiovascular system. Winter's actually a perfect time to harvest mimosa bark, especially from pruned branches or fallen limbs after this storm. You never want to strip back bark from the trunk or girdle a living tree. You're gonna get the branches on the end, and that way you're not harming the tree itself. What I do, I trim branches that are just about as big around as a pencil or my little finger, up to the size as my thumb. You want this past year's growth, not what's old and dried out and dead. I only gather branches when I know that I'll have time to process them in the next 24 hours or so, because once they dry out, the processing gets a lot harder, and I don't want anything to be wasted. And then once you've trimmed those branches, this is a really cool indoor winter activity. I cut them into pieces, maybe 1.5 feet long, whatever's easiest to work with, to hold comfortably in my hands and to strip away. And then I just sit in a comfy chair with a big bowl in my lap, and I use a knife to strip off the outer bark, to just shave that outer bark off. I've heard people say use a potato peeler, but I broke a couple of potato peelers that way, which was not ideal, and that's when I switched to just doing it with a knife. The bark strips are what you want to shave away, and then you have them like a bunch of curly little pencil shavings, and you can grind those into smaller pieces or just use them in strips, fresh or dried, either way. And to use them, you can either simmer the bark on the stove for 30 minutes or so and make a decoction, which is a really strong tea, and drink that, or you can make a tincture, an alcohol extract. So if that's the way you want to go, put your mimosa bark in a clean glass jar and pour in enough 80 proof alcohol to completely cover your bark, and put the lid on and label it with what's in there and the date that you did it and what you put it in, what the liquid is. And then shake it every day for 4 to 6 weeks, and then strain out the liquid, and the liquid that is left is your preparation. Mimosa bark's quiet medicine, but profound, the kind that works slowly and deeply, like winter itself. So the first plant you can forage now is mimosa. You want the bark. It's mostly used for mood support. Get it from small branches, and it can be made into a decoction or a tincture. Next plant, we go lower, all the way to the ground. Hope you brought your shovel. Our next plant is mullein, but maybe not in the way you think. This time of year, we want mullein root. Mullein's easy to recognize in the summer. It gets all those big fluffy leaves, and in the second year there's that tall flower stalk. But in winter you're looking for first year plants, ones that don't have a stalk, and you can tell that they're younger. There's just that low rosette reaching up from the earth. Mullein root has a long history of use for nerve pain, sciatica, lower back issues, and weakness in the pelvic floor or bladder. Mullein root's grounding and supportive, and especially helpful when pain feels tied to instability or depletion. Harvesting mullein root takes patience. Hope you brought your patience along with your shovel. The taproot's long and fragile, so dig slowly and carefully. Start way out away from the plant and sort of circle in, work around in a circle until you find it, so that you're going deeper and deeper with every pass. Winter soil's often damp, which helps. Fresh mullein root is best tinctured right away, so bring it home, clean it off, and then get right to working on it. Although it can also be infused into oil for external topical use, or gently decocted into a tea, but that way is not my favorite because of the taste. This is a medicine that reminds the body how to hold itself. Mullein root is the second medicinal herb that can be foraged right now. Now let's talk about one of East Texas's most infamous plants, kudzu, the vine that ate the South. Most people see kudzu as a problem, and to be fair, it really is invasive. I don't want this one on my land. I want to find it to forage somewhere else. But winter's when kudzu becomes an opportunity. When the vines die back, the roots are easier to access, and harvesting them is actually a service to the land because you're removing some of that invasive plant. Kudzu root is cooling, antispasmodic, and strongly supportive of circulation. Traditionally, it's used for headache, for neck and shoulder tension, muscle stiffness, and even alcohol cravings. So if you really struggled with dry January, it's one to keep in mind for the future. Kudzu helps release pressure, physical and emotional. It also contains phytoestrogens, so sometimes it's a choice for perimenopause or menopause support. The roots can be enormous, gigantic, so focus on younger sections. If you can find where the vine has died back and it's not that huge and long and centuries looking old, that's the one you want. So dig it up. Then get your root and clean it thoroughly and slice it while it's fresh. Again, you want to work with this before it's dried out, otherwise it gets a lot harder to work with. Kudzu root can be decocted, tinctured, dried and powdered, or processed into starch if you're feeling really ambitious. I've never been that ambitious. By the time I get it out of the ground and cleaned up and chopped into pieces, I'm putting it in a jar and pouring vodka over it and calling it a day. But there's something really deeply satisfying about turning an invasive plant into healing medicine. So first plant was mimosa, second was kudzu, next is a plant that people overlook entirely, and I've seen some of these looking cheerful when I've been out walking. It's dandelion. By winter, the leaves are often gone or they're bitter and small. Nothing's flowering after that freeze, but the root is at its peak. All that energy in the plant pulled downward. Dandelion root is one of our greatest liver allies. It supports digestion, bile flow, blood sugar balance, and gentle detoxification, but it's also nourishing, not harsh or depleting. So if you can harvest dandelion root after it's been wet, the soil will give it up more easily. Again, you want to dig deep, clean it well, and chop it right away. And then you can roast the root for tea. That one actually isn't bad tasting. You can decoct it from fresh, or you can put it in a tincture or extract it in vinegar. This is everyday medicine, humble and steady and deeply supportive during winter, heavy winter meals and slower movement. And finally, because I'm just worn out talking about all that digging, let's go back above ground and talk about juniper berries. The eastern red cedar grows all over our area, but it's actually in the juniper family and about the only berry picking you could do this time of year. The dark blue-black berries are actually the tree's cones. They take between 2 and 3 years to mature, which is why you don't see them on every tree all the time. But if you go out and you find those cedar trees, then you find the juniper berries on the cedar trees, which just go with it. The berries, the cones themselves, take 2 or 3 years to mature, which tells you something already about their strength. Juniper's warming, antimicrobial, and stimulating to circulation. Traditionally, it's used for urinary tract support, digestive sluggishness, cold and damp conditions, and winter immune support. You only want to harvest the ripe berries, and you know that they're ripe because they're that dark blue color. Sometimes they have kind of a little bit of a silvery blue coating on them, and that's okay, but you don't want the green ones. Make sure you've correctly identified the species. Not all junipers are safe, and you just have to use your patience. It takes a while to gather very many of the little berries or cones, but you don't need a lot. Use them short term, as long-term use can irritate the digestive system and or the kidneys. So you bring home your juniper berries. You can either make them into a tincture, you can gently decoct them, you can infuse them in honey, which is a really unique taste, or you can literally just put them in your mouth and work the outer part off of them with your teeth and either spit out or swallow the seed. They're sharp, resinous, and clarifying, kind of like cold air filling your lungs and your sinuses. So there you have it, folks. Winter foraging isn't about sensational blooms and huge harvests. It's slower, quieter. You dig instead of gather. This is the medicine you waited patiently for all year, and it takes more patience now to get it ready and use it, but it's so worth it. If you're willing to brave the cold and walk the woods with patience and curiosity, winter has plenty to offer. You just have to know where to look. Let me know how it went. Until next time.